Mother Nature's antifreeze. If you were to take a grass sample once a week in the spring, you would know when the potassium is the highest in your grass. It kind of goes up like this, and then it slowly goes out of the grass. Well, when the grass first starts growing, if it frosts, we don't have to start back over at the ground. It just can take off again, antifreeze. Potassium helps prevent dystocia. So if we're calving when we've got lots of potassium, that has us putting the bulls in. When there's a lot of manganese in the seed heads, if you went to cut hay of native grass, not something you introduced, of native grass in your area, it's almost too rank to cut. That would be the time to put the bulls in. Well, we get more cows pregnant and we'd be pulling fewer calves because we followed nature. So you remember the skeletons, and I said that funky little thing on the one on the left. Well, here's that funky little thing that was on the one on the left. The tail that comes out and hangs straight down is less butterfat, higher maintenance, lower fertility. The one that's kind of mashed in there, like this one, more butterfat, easier calving, lower maintenance. So I was at a place in South Dakota, and you remember how I said earlier when that tail process comes up, the vulva tips forward? Almost every animal we were measuring there was like this. I took a picture and I said, well, I'm surprised that she got bred the first time. I wrote an article called The Heartbreak Bull, and it's about how that real aggressive young bull broke his tool. Well, if all your cows look like this, you're probably going to have that problem. Anyway, I said, I'm surprised she could get bred the first time. And he goes, oh, these were all AI'd. And I said, well, if you can get her pregnant this time, I would sell her and let her be somebody else's problem. Here we can see the problem. This cow is telling you, somewhere inside, I've got a problem. During development, as a fetus, the stars didn't align. Some switch either got flipped on or got flipped off, and I'm not quite as fertile as I could be. Okay? Okay, it's time for this. At 8 months of pregnancy, everybody can go home and know whether I was just blowing smoke today or not. A guy that I told in Texas got 23 out of 24 calves in a row. At 8 months of pregnancy, maybe before, if the hair on the top of the pole of the cow looks like the hay is ready to be swathed, probably a heifer, because on, well, she's sticking up. The adrenal hair whorl, there's a spot on the back of the males and the females. Hopefully it's in the shoulder blade area, but when that heifer first starts cycling, there'll be 3, 4, 5 hairs stand up there because she's now producing estrogen. Well, similarly, if she's got estrogen on board, it's going to stand up. If it's a bull, it's probably going to be laying down. And this guy in Texas got 23 out of 24. And it surprises me because his cattle were not very well mineralized. I was surprised it was that accurate with as poor a mineralization as he had in his herd. And of course, there you go with the tail process sticking up in the air. And she's walking uphill and she's got a bit of not a very fertile cow. So this is also out of the Bonsma book, the milk beast and the beef beast. Well, he's showing a cow in both situations. Problem with the one on the right, walking uphill, flat, real level. These cows tend to take better care of themselves than their calf. This is the milk beast. Let me do this. I'd rather have the last rib somewhere between the hock and the ankle. These girls tend to take better care of their calf than these girls. If you want girls with sloping back ribs, this shape, you need bulls with vertical ribs. So it spreads those front legs out, a lot of width up between the top of the shoulder blades, a U-shaped brisket instead of a V up front. So now we've got the bull shape. So if always pick bulls that have testicles, but they're vertical ribs to give you easy keeping fertile cows, all right?
That's the take-home message?
Your bulls have to have testicles. Okay, we're done here, and there's no questions. Pay the man at the door on the way out. So she's too deep in the chest. Imagine taking these ribs, and as you rotate them back, see what happens? The chest gets further off the ground. That red cow in Nebraska, I said she's going to get too fat for where she lives. Her last rib angle was kind of in between this vertical and the dotted line. It was pointed in front of her toe, and that was part of her problem. But she had too many other great qualities about her and her calves to get rid of her. But he's going to lose her because she's going to get too fat. We've got to have her walking downhill. We need the solo cup look, okay? It's pretty easy. She's a little bit hungry. It's pretty easy to see the angle of that last rib, all right? When I see somebody's got 100 cows and there's 3 of them that are just porky. The others, you can see the rib. I suspect that they're vertical ribs. And a lot of times, if they're numbered, they'll go, oh yeah, she didn't raise much of a calf. Pay attention to the angle of that last rib. It's a thing. It is a thing. So remember me taking the cow to western Wyoming because she got too fat. This is the amount of fat. All the bad stuff has an affinity for pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, toxins, and hormones. The cow that gets too fat, she gets bred. It's time to send estrogen or progesterone back there to keep the corpus luteum going. It gets gobbled up in her own fat, and she just cycles again and cycles again and cycles again. This was what was happening to that cow that I sent to Wyoming. And about 18 months later, she had her dewlap back, and she was having good calves again. But she just had to go on a diet, and it was a lot of walking. Probably would, okay. I was trying to get around this bull, and he kept moving away, but his last rib is right here. And if you were from the side, you would see it would be pointing right at his prepuce, which is what you would like to see in a bull for that angle of that last rib, okay? So Johann, 8 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sack, but without grain, I've seen steers and heifers go to the feedlot, and front feet, the toes are angled out because they're too narrow. And by the time you got them fat, now they're pigeon-toed. Who was it showed the picture of the steak with all the marbling? Was that you? Okay. So you think in a ribeye steak, not only is there marbling, but all those fat seams in between those individual muscles. You start putting the fat in there and the front end spreads out and those toes will go like this. If they're fed grain, you can't look for pigeon-toed bulls. Those are the most fertile if they weren't fed grain because they had vertical ribs like this. Well, you can't really use a number of things, but you can't change the shape of their head. Pointed pole on a cow, if you think about taking a golf ball and cutting it in half and sticking it right up on top of the skull. That's about as small as I've seen. On a bull, a tennis ball, you cut it in half, stick it up there. On a bull, grain-fed or not, I like to see the ones that are keeping the hair worn off of the pole because you know they like to practice basketball rather than watch it from the couch. I don't like a bull with a great big belly. They might be lazy. I want a bull whose mother, grandmother, and aunts all had big bellies. Then I know I'm breeding big bellies, AKA easy keeping, into my cow herd. Having a big belly on the bull don't impress me much. Okay, he might be lazy. Okay, so Classic Livestock Management Services out of Australia said if you can see the epididymis, the 2 little walnut-sized pieces from, well, the different guy, This guy describes them well, but that's a different book. Anyway, you have a pretty good idea that that bull can service 50 to 60 cows in the first, in a 21-day breeding season. All right, so if you can't linear measure them, how in the world would we know how big the chest is, okay? So deep, for each inch that heart girth goes down, we gain 2 inches of heart girth. In Nebraska in the 90s, they measured 20,000 head, linear measured 20,000 head of steers to find out which ones were going to be the ones that would gain the most and eat the least. And they found for every inch the heart girth, so measuring around here, for every inch, this was a bigger number than from pole to pin. That was 37 more pounds of gain and 37 fewer pounds of grain to do it. You got more gain and they ate less, the bigger the heart girth. So the width between the front legs, the U-shaped brisket, toes straight forward, the loin doesn't fall off. See, he's almost full here, right behind. Uh-oh, we lost something. So that vertical rib is going to give you more of a U-shaped brisket. Oh, so I was over in Minnesota, and that V-shaped rib, she found that the heart was smaller and the brisket was smaller. And the U-shaped brisket, there was a larger heart in that animal and more pounds of brisket in that. I don't know how many people direct market, but that's a thing. And then Secretariat, everybody probably knows the story, but he, at the Kentucky Derby, Sham ran the fastest any horse had ever run, except Secretariat ran a little faster. So then at Preakness 2 weeks later, Sham breaks the record again. He runs faster than any other horse has ever run. Secretariat ran a little faster. At the beginning of the Belmont Stakes, Sham had hit his head against the starting gate and broke out 2 teeth and was bleeding. And so when the blood caught up with him, you see him fade away. Secretariat ran, I don't know, 31 lengths or something. No horse has ever equaled that. Well, the normal race horse, they're trying to figure out what made this horse special. They autopsy them, and 7 to 9 pound heart. 14 was the biggest heart they'd ever found in a racehorse. When Secretariat died, his heart weighed 22 pounds, and 4 years later, Sham died, and his heart weighed 18 pounds, the 2 biggest hearts they'd ever found in racehorses. They'd have both been Triple Crown winners if they'd have just been a year apart. Fire and ice breeding. The higher the backbone of the cow sticks up above the top of the shoulder blades, the higher the maintenance of the cow. So if we've got a herd of cows, and you can see when their head's down, the backbone should be below the top of the shoulder blades, bull or cow. While I'm right there, I want to do something else. As you're watching them walk, you want to see that shoulder blade come up above the backbone slightly. All right? If these are the hook bones and this is the backbone, as they walk, you want to see those hook bones rotating up above that backbone. You don't see this very often. You'll see the shoulder deal quite a bit more often than you'll see the hook bones. You'll be selling bulls out of those two from South Africa here pretty quick. Anyway, so we've got a cow who is fairly high maintenance, Jersey. Yeah, okay, here's her son out of that bull. He wasn't real wide, he was just flat with his head up. But if you could find a bull who with his head up, his shoulder blades were above his backbone, and you had a bunch of cows with their head up whose backbone was above the shoulder blades, in one generation you could balance that out. You're usually about halfway between the bull and the cow. The more years of thoughtful breeding have gone into the bull and his background, the more dramatic the change. If it's just the stars aligned and you finally got that good looking bull, it's not the same thing. Years of thoughtful breeding going into it. Again, how many in here do direct marketing? I won't really take time. And you've got this on the thumb drive. So a bald udder is #1 indicator of butter fat. Butter fat is, well, it's more than free. One, it's their ability to put fat on their back, and then two, with more butter fat, not milk. Milk is maintenance cost. Butter fat is more than free. The more butter fat, the easier keeping the cows. There's going to be more hair on the udder of a cow in Montana that's still considered bald than there would be what was considered bald in Texas, okay? You're gonna have more hair here than down there. Vertical folds in the hide. So the starting in the neck, over the shoulder, back behind the ribs, the more vertical folds, that's a real close #2 for butter fat. If you're looking for a bull because you have kind of coarse cows, well, we can't look at his udder, but we can look at the vertical folds in the hide. We can look at the bone fineness, small diameter tail, pointed poll, things like that, to try to put some fineness back in the bull. So fine bones. This is a clean hock. I'll go past that one because it'd be for those that are direct marketing. Anyway, a bald udder, you're not going to get those shaped teats if your bulls have these funnel shaped teats, especially down on the neck of the scrotum. Again, we're back to Drayson. The position of the teats, well, if they're on the neck, you're going to get tilted udders. And the shape of the teats, this guy had 4,000 Hereford cows, 2,000 fall and 2,000 spring calvers, and he was throwing away 600-700 animals a year just because of their udders. The teat would start out about the size of this bottom of this bottle, and at about that much difference, it was a point. Calf couldn't get a meal. And so we looked through all of his bulls, and he had one that was almost okay. The rest of them all had teats on the neck of the scrotum, didn't know to look for it. That's a pretty good book if you use bulls. Okay, I don't know why that is in the wrong place. So back to more butter fat, calving ease. Look on the back, this tail that comes out and hangs straight down is less butter fat, harder calving. Big switch, broom handled tail is what I should have heard, but I didn't when I was your age.
My age.
Theirs, come on. The anti-fertility bone, I mean, we're going for growth. We're told we're supposed to go for growth, but it costs us dearly in fertility and keeping cost on the ranch. So this is that cow down there in Texas that she was the slightest built cow in their area, but she was screaming, "I love Athens," southeast of Dallas. So she's walking downhill on level ground. She's got a lot of vertical folds. They went clear back to the back of her ribs, and then there are a bunch more from the vulva down to the udder. Those cows, those heifers, when you find a heifer or a cow with a lot of vertical folds from the vulva down to the udder, they almost always turn into really good cows. They almost always turn into really good cows. Anyway, I like that about her. Her stifle muscle, I couldn't figure out. I mean, you got the hip socket, stifle joint, hock. I couldn't figure out why that stifle muscle was so big. The earlier in life you see that stifle muscle show up on a bull calf or a heifer, the more fertile that animal is. But for as slight as built as she is, I couldn't figure out why that was working. Well, what I noticed was she'd walked up there and then she turned but didn't move. I guess I should be on this side. She walked up there and turned but didn't move this right hind hoof. If you can see, it's still in place, which pushed her stifle joint into her side, which made that muscle look bigger. See what you are looking at. I mean, when you see something that looks off, figure out why it is, what made it look off. Anyway, I wish that her whole tail process was gone. You know, I'd like to see more slope there. There's some vertical folds. That they almost always are really good cows or heifers that would make really good cows. If you've got bulls that have a lot of vertical folds back there, you should be getting daughters that tend to look like this as well. Vertical folds in the hide on a bull. And some more of that. Number 2 for both meat and milk. So the cannon bone. So we don't want a big knee, big knobby knee, and we want it to get as small as it can get right here underneath the knee, and then that bell bottom look as it widens out to the width of the ankle. I wonder if that's what Abraham used. But anyway, same cow, but I didn't distort this, and I went back and checked. That half shorthorn, I like shorthorns. They're usually good meat. He had the biggest cannon bone that I ever saw in a steer, and I told the owner, I was there for a different reason. I turned to the owner and I said, whatever you do, grind that whole steer. You will have tough meat. You'll make 10 customers mad if you try to sell steaks out of an animal with that big of a knee. So the dotted line here, you see how knobby his knees. Unusually small legs for the size of the animal. I had a slide earlier where I showed off the back cannon bone with that indentation in the outside below the hock. That you don't see very often. This is number 1 for tenderness. So the cow is not too bad, but if you had to choose between these 2 calves, which calf would the group choose? Good for you, the one on that side. If that was the only thing you were using was the size of the cannon bone, yes, that one on the left has got the nicer cannon bone. This is just the gamut of what you would see with hooves. Normally we find ourselves in here. If you've got this, you can't go there. You just have to go there, go there, go there to try to fix the problem, all right? Enough about that, I guess. So I liked this cow as to how straight her leg was, but I wanted this to be smaller here. I felt like it was too just wide all the way down. And then I got to looking at it, and look at how smooth her hoof is. That year they had the big deep freeze in Texas and all of the windmills burn up and whatnot. I could tell how long it had been since the deep freeze. You get there and here's a big old bump in the side of the hoof. It's like, oh, it was 3 months ago when they had the deep freeze. And then you're there in the fall and that same bump has moved its way down here. You could tell when the stress was, but this animal was having practically zero stress, very well mineralized environment throughout the whole year. So pointed pole and the adrenal hair whorl, that spot, I can't turn that, but the hair going 360 degrees. I already did this part. So here's a calf, adrenal hair whorl, made it even easier to see. Everybody can kind of see that. So this is a, what was 10? Okay. This is a bull, but if it were a heifer, when she starts cycling, there'd be 3, 4, 5 hairs stick up right in the middle of that, and they will remain standing till within about a month of getting pregnant, and then they'll lay down because progesterone's taken over. If you had your hands on them, you're going to the end of the tail and you're peeling the hair back. If it's yellow flakes, that's a lot of butterfat. Same thing in the ear if it's coming out into the hair. If you don't have them where you can get your hands on, you can't see this, but this is right out of Drayson, epididymis, shape of a football. You You can measure them at 7.5 to 9 months, and then 12, 16, 24, 36, to know how good they'll be. Length is more important than circumference until you get out of bounds on circumference. There is a PDF of this book, Factors Affecting Calf Crop. Bonsma is in there, and 2 or 3 times. If you already know something about a cow, this is the best book I ever read. All right? Everybody done with the picture taken? This Natasha Campbell McBride, that is a very good book. It's about human health, but you'll learn a lot about your cows if you buy that book. Okay. Oops, yeah. So I was reading a book called Epigenetic Revolution, and I ran across this Waddington's epigenetic landscape, and more on this tomorrow, but we put the cattle inside of a fence, and if we don't give them what they need, if what's in that grass is not enough to sustain them, the ball's going to roll down the left side. The earlier in life we do the right thing, before the bull and cow get together. Takes 120 days, change out all the red blood cells. We need our cows and our bulls on the best diet we can give them. If it's not in the grass, maybe tomorrow we'll figure out how to do it with sea salt and conditioner. Anyway, at the point of conception, what did we get? I was about 15 miles off the east end of Lake Erie. Fellow had 45 purebred cows, so 20 to 25 heifers every year. It's a... Let's see, he had 11, 23, and 35-month-old heifers there. There were 1 or 2 of the 11-month-old heifers I thought were worth keeping. There were 3 or 4 of the 23-month-old, but of the 35-month-old getting ready to have their first calf in 1 month. No way he could get them developed before that. There were 13 or 14, and I'm like, well, what'd you do? A different mineral, a different bull? No. I said, did you either have a really cold or a really dry winter, here in the recent past? Because normally it rains there and the cattle are in mud, and then it snows and melts, and they're in mud and they're in mud and they're in mud all winter. And he says, oh yeah, we had a bad winter here a few years ago. I go, well, when was it? He gets his cell phone out. And the winter that those 35-month-old heifers getting ready to have their first calf, the winter they were in utero, it got 12 or 15 degrees colder. The ground froze, and they were either on frozen ground or snow all winter. Mother Nature eliminated the stress of mud, and he was finally expressing the genetics that he already owned. I said, well, you're either going to have to move, wasn't going to happen, or somehow artificially create this not being in mud. And then a fellow on the Arizona Strip, 1,000 cows on 250,000 acres. It takes 250 acres for 1 cow to make a living. He called me one August and said, normally I have to wean the calves off these first calf heifers to get them to breed back, but they're not losing body condition this year. And I said, well, Kelly, different bull, more than your normal 4 inches of rain, mineral, no. And I said, well, Kelly, how long did you leave those heifers on their mother? And he thought for a little bit, and he goes, that was the first year I tried that 10-month weaning. And we talk off and on, and about 2.5 years later, he says, of all of the things I've tried out here on the Arizona Strip, leaving those heifers on their mother, he wasn't leaving the steers or anything else. It was just his replacement heifers. That's where you'll make the most money. Anyway, he said, of all of the things that I've tried, this has been the most profitable thing I've ever done. You could not pay me $100 a replacement heifer to wean her before 10 months of age. So, recapping, the shape, we're looking for that shape. She sheds early, and then the butterfat indicators. hopefully you can do a thing or two at home. Everybody in the moment will have my contact information, but it might be in the folder. And I don't like those other people, so I kind of did my own little thing there. Anyway, so look at how small diameter that tail is on that cow. You know? Butterfat, butterfat, butterfat. So easy keeping. A big belly. We developed the villi and the rumen by leaving the calf on, but if we add butterfat to that as well, we've got an even more efficient animal. Questions? You've been gracious to wait until now to raise your hand for the most part. Yes, sir.
You talked about that 10-month
Weaning.
yeah, weaning. Is there a upper extent to that?
Could you leave them on longer? So a couple of things about that. Yes, you could. One year I waited until next year's model was born, and then I just took last year's model and stuck them in with the grass fats. Okay, but what I did is I slowed down that next generation to finish because I needed my cows to lose some weight. I needed to be able to take some feed away, and I couldn't get the calves to go through a panel so they could get into some yummy hay. I just never could get them trained. There's another thought there. Don't do this on all of the animals. Just do it on your replacement heifers if you want to see if it works. And so we've got, Cooper, what percent of your replacement heifers are you keeping? Just give me a number. 93%. You keep all your heifers. Okay, you don't count. You're doing something different, sorry. You know, let's just say somebody's keeping 25 or 30% replacement heifers. So that's more than half of their heifer crop. But maybe you've got calves on 1/3 of your cows by keeping a 30% replacement heifer crop. You know, we got half of our calves are bulls and half are heifers. Well, we're keeping 60% of the heifers to have 30% replacement for all of our cows. You may this year have to take some of those cows with their daughter on them and put them in a different group and supplement them. You may have to spend a little money to leave that calf on. And let's just say that's $50. But you saw the numbers on that, what it cost to run a cow if she digested 70% of what she ingested versus 40%. If you spent $50 this year, you might save $50 a year for the next 10 years of that heifer being in your herd. I spent $1, I got back $10 over time. This is worth doing. The marginal efficiency of capital. I spend $1, do I get 10 back? $3.75, $1.25, or most of the time 95 cents, seems like these days. Yes, sir.
So following up on this theme, because I'm kind of curious, Cooper, because he's talked a lot about early weaning as a strategy for cost-effective way of maintaining strong conditions for his cows, particularly in the winter. And he referred also to Burke Teichert, who said he thought one of his best practices for determining fertility of your heifer calves is to expose them for like just one cycle, and just use that practice as a way to just make that cut. So how do you square an approach like that versus these other subtle kind of things like leaving the heifer on the cow, and obviously looking at just...
Not everything will work everywhere. There is no cookbook.
And our environment's really different. Yeah.
I like Burke's idea of 21 days. You're only going to breed the most fertile, and everybody else goes a different direction. Maybe in the market we're in right now, you might want to rethink that. But I really like what you said today, Cooper, about when you re-expose those first calvers. Thank you. That was awesome. If you're trying to sell, being able to keep 93% of your heifer calves, one, you've got a lot of waste. I don't mean to say it sounds bad, but you're going to be really hard on them. You're going to put reproductive pressure on them, so only a certain percent are going to breed 21 days or whatever. But I like it where you do put the reproductive pressure, Burke-Teichert. Anything you can read by Burke-Teichert would be worth your while. If you want that PDF of that factors affecting calf crop, send me an email and I will send that back to you. Don't send me a text, send me an email, because then I don't have to search out I can't send it to you by text. But I mean, it's a good question, and oh my gosh, you'll have years where you can't do this. It works 4 out of 5 years. Everything else being equal, 70-80% of the time, these things work, but it doesn't work everywhere. But how many different concepts were there? And let's just say there were 10 and 7 of them worked for you.
Well, so I think Burke was referring to a situation where you are sort of also in a yearling terminal thing situation where, yeah, you got those numbers, you're going to get enough by the short period of breeding period, and you want those open heifers for your other market to go into, whether it's a yearling program or in our situation, we're selling them through our co-op all the way through. So you actually want those guys.
Yeah, and if direct marketing, that works. So actually I think it was in July, I went up to Sheridan. Burke's grandson and brother were there, and we looked through 600 heifers. And he's like, well, I'm going to breed them all, but I kind of want to know what you say. And it's like, well, I don't think she can eat enough for one. I don't know if she'll breed. I think she might get pregnant, but I don't think she'll breed back. I think she can eat enough 3. I think she'll get pregnant and breed back. So we won't know the and breed back until another year. But I did talk to him here about a week ago, and he said, well, didn't have enough guts, probably couldn't eat for one. He said, yeah, you were real close on what did and what didn't breed, but he exposed them all because his uncle's Burke-Teichert. How are you going to go against what Uncle Burke said? Any other questions? I left out a bunch of slides just to make it short enough I could fit it in the thing. I'll be around.
It is 5, so we'll go ahead and kind of break here soon, and we'll kind of head back over to that area we were at before for a little social hour. But if you guys have questions, feel free to stay here and talk with Steve, or else, he'll be around tomorrow too. He'll be doing another talk as well. So, if everybody wants to get around.